Hello and welcome back to Sprite Guard Plays HyperRogue. Today we are on the lookout for an ocean. We are going to set sail, head out on the high seas. I have a little bit of a plan written up for how I'm going to approach this. Basically, we need to go to Relaya and enter the temple is our ultimate goal. And along the way we are going to be talking a little bit about some of the geometry in this game, because that's something that I have not said very much about in a little while, and I realized that there was an opportunity to use the coast of Relaya as a little bit of an illustration for one of the more difficult to understand parts of this game. So we are going to be on the lookout for that. We are also going to try and head to the Caribbean and pick up the Orb of Time there. I'm not sure that we'll be able to do that today. Probably we'll just focus on one or the other. And my first goal is to track down Relaya, so that's where we'll be looking for first. So here is a Crossroads Type 3 for us. And you can see if we stand right up against it, we have, it curves just very slightly downward toward us. And if we step just a little ways away, it starts to curve almost straight parallel with us in a straight line. So it's tracing out a curve that is roughly equidistant to the line we're standing on. And if we take another step away, now it curves pretty sharply away from us. I always think that's pretty cool, that you can kind of see how all of these right angles are adding up to a curve. You could imagine walking along this great wall and just making 90-degree turn after 90-degree turn and never get back to where you started. Which I think is one of the neater properties of this geometry. I know that I've played a lot of games that have that, kind of get that property in a very direct way. Games like Antechamber, where it's just different areas will randomly link up in ways that aren't really mathematically rigorous, but get the job done. Let's see if we can deal with these guys. Looks like our bird's going to deal with some of them for us. And we actually have an Orb of the Mind. We have about 50 charges left, so that's something to remember. And it's something probably to use just to simplify things for us. It looks like our bomber bird is getting a little confused. I don't see any way of getting to that orb of... Yeah, that's an Orb of the Mind. That's a very valuable thing that we unlocked in the last episode, I believe, so... That is something that I'm glad we did. Now let's see, we have an Orb of Luck. I don't actually think we want an Orb of Luck. Actually, we do. And the reason for that is we have not collected the treasures from Relaya yet, and so we want a good chance of Relaya appearing. And we're just going to follow the tide out, try and find our way to a boat. Looks like we've got one coming up here. And let's see, we have an Orb of Air. I don't think we need that. And then we're going to have to, let's see, we're going to have to wait at some point. I think we want to wait as far out as possible. And yeah, we're just going to have to wait here for the tide to turn around. And then we can set sail. So we are looking out for what's going to look actually like a horocyclic land. That's actually something that I was thinking about the other day, that it really looks like it's very difficult to tell the whirlpool and the shore apart from very far out until you see whether or not, you know, you can, I believe you can hover over it and see. You can also see that there's no boats spinning around in here, but it looks very much like a horocycle. But as we go deeper in, it's going to become more and more of an equidistant curve, and it's going to look more and more line-like. And there's going to kind of be... There's still very few directions that we can go in that will not take us toward the ocean. You can see that the ocean line takes up most of the directions around me. And I believe that actually some of this where we can't see the ocean, a lot of these directions in front of us would actually take us outward as well. And so, you can see that Relia here takes up a very small part of our total view angle. If you think of the area around us as kind of... I mean, it is a circle. You kind of see everything around you in a circle. And the closer we get to Relia, the more of an angle it takes up in our view. And that grows at a much more kind of abrupt rate than it would in our world. In our world, it kind of... Things at a very linear pace get bigger and bigger as you get closer to them, whereas here they stay tiny for a very long time and then kind of swell up really quickly. And so... The Haunted Woods are a land that appear to be horocyclic from the outside because they're that very tight equidistant curve, like we saw in the ocean. And then there's an invisible line, like the Great Wall, that takes up a tiny, tiny amount of your view, but because it's a horocyclic land, it's very difficult to get into, or because it resembles a horocyclic land, it's very difficult to get to that line, but the treasures actually guide you toward that line, and so you can find your way deeper and deeper in, until very abruptly you get to this invisible boundary where all of a sudden when you cross it, now more of the directions around us lead deeper into Relia than lead out into the ocean. And as we take, even a couple of steps past that, the angle that the ocean takes up drops very quickly. So now even if we kind of at a very, very shallow angle, even if we, very almost head back to the ocean, we'll just end up going into more of Relia. And so that is why you don't get any of the Haunted Wood achievements until you leave it, because it's very easy to rack up a lot of treasures in a way that will not let you escape. But I do believe you keep them as part of your score if you end the game. I'm not sure of that, I would have to check, but my understanding is that kind of the in-universe explanation for the game over is you realize that you've been trapped, or that you've been, in some way compromised, and you have to teleport back home. And that orb of safety has actually taken us right near an ocean again. But we want to, let's see, we have 5 statues at this point. So yeah, there's a temple. I think that the best strategy for taking on the temple is to get 5 statues exactly, then get your 10 grimoires, and then come out and get the other 5 statues. What that accomplishes is it lets you come out of the temple into a little bit of a safer environment. And then you can actually make your way to the exit of Relia before you actually start collecting the last 5 treasures. And so that's just a way of managing the amount of threat that you're pulling. And we have a couple of cult leaders that we have to deal with here. The cultists cannot move statues, only the cult leaders can. And one thing that we should remember is that we don't have to pick up a book in every layer. We can skip a layer, like we can just skip from layer 8 to layer 9, and then pick up 2 books here. There we go. Or rather, I guess from layer 9 to layer 10, because that is the last of them. So now we're going to head outward. And here again we kind of have that thing of the arc that is kind of taken up by deeper parts of the horocycle is very narrow compared to the arc that's taken up by this band that shows us where the next layer of the temple outward is. And so the number of directions we can go in, even though on each step there's only like 6 or 7 directions you can go in, over the course of many steps there are far more different directions, exponentially increasing, that you can end up going in. And far more of those are going to take us out of the temple than are going to take us in. And that's why it's actually quite a lot easier to escape the temple than it is to go in. You have a lot more opportunities. Another thing that kind of characterizes these lands is that we have to go very, very far along the outside of the temple to reach a new part of the temple when we go in. But when we go into the temple and then come back out, we're very unlikely to come back out where we went in. And that's just kind of a consequence of circles. The boundary of circles increasing exponentially is that we just have far more distance to cover when we just go a few steps out of the circle. So we only need 2 more statues. Let's see if we can get them and then hop into this crossroads here. And once it goes off of our screen, there's very few directions that we can go in that will even take us closer to it. But I managed to remember one that was good enough. So we now have the Orb of the Dragon available to us, and I am going to check the time, see how we're doing. And I think I'm going to head on the search for an Orb of Safety. We have accomplished the first thing that we set out to do. We still want to set out to sea once again and track down the Orb of Time. We also want to use the Orb of the Dragon to burn down a vineyard and get us the Orb of Ether, which we will use to take into the Red Rock Valley. And we would really like to find an Orb of Ether and an Orb of Time Orb of Ether and Orb of the Dragon relatively near each other. And so we will be looking for that. And if I find a vineyard, I'm going to probably go along the edge of it so that we can... yeah, here we go. We can see if we can find an Orb of Safety. Ah, well, no, that's not going to accomplish anything, because the Orb of Safety, who knows where that will take us. And we are out of charges on all of our orbs. Might have been good to pick up that Orb of Teleport. Those are very valuable. This Orb of Flash could be very valuable to us. And that's an Orb of Yendor. I don't think we have any use for that yet. Well, we used up our flash pretty quickly, but that's alright. So, once we have the Orb of Space, we're going to go back into the overgrown woods and try and track down a giant ivy. And we're basically going to try and steal mutant fruit from it. What we'd really like to do is steal mutant fruit and then use the Orb of the Dragon to burn it down a little bit. I'm not sure that will work, but that's my first plan for what I want to try. But for now, we are just looking for an Orb of Safety. And one thing, we can kind of look for and hope for, though I don't know how likely it is to happen, is if we see an Orb of Safety inside of the vineyard. That would be something that would actually be really nice, because that way we would not have to hunt down a vineyard. Though then we would actually be at a pretty big risk of not being able to find a crossroads. And so that's kind of its own risk. Though I have started such a fire here that I'm wondering, is it maybe a little bit better to see, how much wine can we pick up and then still make our way out of here And it can be a little bit tricky to navigate the vineyard when you only have this one fire track, and it looks like it has dead-ended. And we don't have a really easy way of picking up this wine here, so I'm actually going to head back. And I think I'm going to pass on this because it's much easier to find a vineyard from the crossroads than it is to find a crossroads from the vineyard. I'm not sure what started this fire here, but we can certainly take advantage of it and see if we can track down a few more wines. But we're getting kind of swarmed here already, so don't know that it is entirely worthwhile. We do have to be very careful here, because this is one of those areas where it's very easy to get blocked in, very easy to lose your way, and we are just not committed enough to what we're doing for it to be worth. So I see a fire down there, so that is away from the crossroads. Here's the crossroads right here. Let's head back into it and see if we can find an orb of safety in the crossroads proper. Because I still think that is the better way of doing things. We have a lot more room to navigate here. We have a lot more options here. We just are much more able to dictate the terms of our engagement. Now here we have an orb of safety that we can see, but we have no way of getting to it. I do not see any path into that portion of the crossroads, which is something that can happen in the Crossroads Type 3. I've had it happen actually a few times where there was an orb kind of on the other side in a different part of the crossroads that I could not figure out how to get to. Orb of Air is insurance at least, though we will have to notice that we're in trouble before it's too late in order to use that, so it's not a huge amount of insurance, but it could save us. There are situations in which it could save our lives. So here is an orb of safety in the crossroads. Drop into that. We will have to go on the lookout for another vineyard, but that should not be too difficult for us to find, especially if we run into another orb of luck. So thank you very much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.